And you are with the platform, the resistance. The resistance to what? Well, whatever you want. But I'll tell you what we are resistant to. We're resistant to the rule of the mob, to the crushing of free speech, and to government that demands groupthink of its citizens and tolerates no deviance. That's what we resist on the platform. We're resistant to media that buy the government's line and are part of the problem of the crushing of free speech. Now, I had promised you Posie Parker today. We've been talking, Kelly J and I. She's on her way back to Britain, and I'm not sure she can join us this morning. But a lot of other people are. And could I say we are a talkback station? And we have a text number, 5050, and already, I'm not kidding, I got 100 texts or more to read to you. And we've got a phone number, 0800 33 2283, where you can ring and say what you think, and no one will punch you in the face or push you to the ground or screech at you while the police stand by and do nothing. We are free and open. And I would encourage anyone of whatever gender orientation, whatever gender, whatever sex, whatever age, whatever ethnicity, to ring in this morning and share your views of what was one of the weirdest and scariest weekends in New Zealand. The number is 0800 33 2283. But I will say that female callers, that's adult white female women callers, will get priority this morning because they got no priority or protection from our society in Albert Park on Saturday. But we have a lot of people lined up to talk, strangely enough, most of them women. And I just want to give you some background. We had Posie Parker on, a couple of weeks ago now, and I told her things were going to be worse in New Zealand than they were in Australia for her, and her speaking to her about issues and concerns that women have about transgender rights, particularly in women's only spaces. I told her it would get mad here and it would be worse. And lo and behold, I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. And on Saturday, Posie Parker and perhaps more importantly, a group of New Zealand women wanted to go to a public space and voice those concerns. They were confronted with a mob that had been whipped up by a couple of individuals and gay rights or rainbow organisations, encouraged by our mainstream media, who had been busy in the days before painting, deliberately mispainting, misrepresenting Posie Parker as some sort of Nazi and anti-trans activist. With the help of the news media, some very bad faith players in New Zealand managed to get together an angry mob who did not exercise their free speech, they exercised thuggery. And no one around the world who has seen what happened in Albert Park is under any illusion that that was a peaceful protest or a counter-protest. It was a mob. And Kelly J fled for her life as activists and angry people stormed the barricades. A supporter of the Green Party, a man dressed as a woman, threw tomato sauce at her. That person's identity is well known. I don't know if the police have done anything, but perhaps one of the most disturbing things was police knew this was going to happen. And a detachment of police officers stood just yards away by some cars in a public street while people called them and begged them to go and rescue Posie Parker, Kelly J. Keane-Minchell and her supporters, and they did nothing. It was up to a small and overwhelmed security detail to get her out of. She was literally surrounded by this baying mob, and it was up to a small security detail to get her out of there. Police did not come to rescue her. Oh, they put on a good show once she got to the street, but they left her hanging. Her and, more importantly, her supporters hanging. She was then taken to Auckland Central Police Station, where police convinced her that her life was at risk. She was already of that view, and said the best thing she could do would be to leave the country. She stayed with the police, fearful for her life, was given an escort to the station and left New Zealand, to the airport, and left New Zealand on Saturday night. What a sad, sorry chapter in New Zealand's history. The so-called gay community, though I don't believe those who have crowed and cackled on Facebook do actually represent our LGBTQI whatever community. They have cackled that it was a victory for love. It was not. It was the death of reason. I also know we had a government minister saying that white cis men, Marama Davidson, caused all the violence in the world before she was hit, and I don't know under what circumstances, by a motorcycle, though I think she will survive. That's what happened. I will tell you more about some of the discussions I had with people over the weekend. But I thought, given that women were denied the opportunity to speak on Saturday, I should start the show today talking to a woman, and a woman who represents a group that was aligned with or involved in Kelly J. Keane Mitchell's or Posie Parker's visit to New Zealand. That's Susan Levy. She is a spokesperson for Speak Up for Women. Suzanne, welcome to the platform. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Suzanne, firstly, just to clarify, what was your involvement or your organisation's involvement with Kelly J's visit to New Zealand?
Okay, so we, Speak Up for Women, were not hosting Kelly J. We were very interested in the fact that she was coming, and we're very happy to use the platform and to provide a space for women to speak. We've seen her events in other parts of the world that have been really successful, with basically her kicking it off and then women coming up and saying what they thought.
Okay.
And we would have loved to have seen that here. There are other women who were responsible for organising the whole event, and that wasn't Speak Up for Women, though there were plenty of women from within.
Okay,
our group
who was that, involved. Suzanne? Was that an existing?
Group,
yeah.
A group of individuals set up to sort of manage it, which seems to be the way Kelly J runs things. So it was kind of who's interested in helping, and they got together and they formed a group called Let Women Speak New Zealand, and kind of they took it from there. And people volunteered, and
some of your members volunteered.
It was yeah, definitely, yeah.
So, Suzanne, did you go along to Albert Park on Saturday?
No, I'm in Wellington, so I would have gone to the one yesterday if it had been on.
Yeah.
No,
so, like most of the rest of us, you would have seen what happened unfold on social media through live feeds and the like.
I did. I was watching it, sitting in my car in Newtown, watching it all unfold. I was just completely. I couldn't believe it. I knew that it was going to be noisy. I thought that the police had enough information that they would hold a line between the woman in the band rotunda and the fence. That's all they needed to do. They needed to stand in that gap, and they didn't. And it was inevitable that it was just going to be destroyed. That those barriers just came down like. Was that a counter protest to your mind? Was that a certain community expressing its freedom of speech in response? Yeah,
to someone else or to women's freedom of speech.
It was. It was the Let Women Speak were holding an event. It had a permit. It was a properly organised, managed event. And the trans rights activists were holding the protest, which is perfectly acceptable, but it was always going to get out of hand, and the police knew that, and the media and our helpful politicians had whipped everybody into a frenzy. I think the people in that crowd actually thought they had a mandate to do whatever was required to stop it happening. That's the kind of feeling that I got. And it seems like the police just sort of almost stood back and watched it happen.
Do you think?
That's my take.
Yeah. Do you think women in groups like yours were denied a voice on Saturday?
Absolutely. I think that we should have been able to stand up, even if the noise was so loud from the protest that women couldn't be heard. There was a live stream, and that picks up the voices anyway. And that should have been able to happen. It should have been safe. It should have been safe for women to stand up in the middle of a park in Auckland and say what they thought. Say what the things that are troubling them, the things that they want to talk about to do with women's rights, to do with child safeguarding, to do with all the stuff that's been going on that our media doesn't listen to. They don't want to hear about it. And this basically just said, sit down, shut up.
I take it your group has talked amongst itself over the weekend. What is the feeling amongst Speak Up for Women about what happened on Saturday?
None of us were surprised that there was a massive protest. Okay. I think we're surprised at the violence. I think we're surprised at the doubling down by the media and politicians.
Well, what do you mean by that? Doubling down by the media and so does the media just sit there and report this stuff?
Well, I think they continue to report it as if the so-called rainbow community that I used to be a part of. I suppose I still am, but I don't really consider it that way now. We're having this joyful celebration that just happened to drown out the voices of women, and it's really clear from the footage that I've seen, and you don't have to look too hard to find it, that it was a violent mob taking over the band rotunda. It was not a joyous occasion with singing and celebration, and the media are seem to be very reluctant to push that.
Well, the front page of your paper and the Dominion Post says of the Sunday event, conflict-free rally, a beautiful show of love.
Well, is that the Wellington?
The Dominion Post
thing yesterday.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah, but are they referring to the Wellington?
Yeah. They just say it was a wonderful show of love.
But the Wellington.
The Wellington rally. I mean, did you want to be there and say something?
Well, no. I mean, that's the thing. When trans activists have a rally to support their people, we don't show up like an angry mob and try to shut them down, do we?
No,
we just let them have their space.
Yeah.
And that's really all women are asking as well. We'd like to be able to hold events to talk about stuff to do with women that's quite frankly nothing to do with men. We'd like to be able to have those sorts of things. There's a new group called the Lesbian Project who did a sort of launch thing in London yesterday, and they you imagine a group of lesbians, quite a large group, in a place in London, and they were protested.
Yeah. And, what happened in Albert Park what happened in Albert Park's gone around the world. J.K. Rowling's got into it.
I know. Yeah.
Joe Rogan, I think, is into it.
I was ashamed. I was, ashamed of New Zealand. We should have such a good women's rights history.
Yeah. Suzanne, what should the government's response be? What should it be, not what will it be?
What should it be? They should be condemning violence against women, and they should be facilitating some dialogue, because there are obviously conflicts between people who think that transgender women are women in every respect, and people who don't think that. And it's a completely valid thing to think that trans women are not women, trans women are men. They, every trans woman that's out there, they all have one thing in common, and that's that they're a man. So, you can't get away from that. So we need to be able to discuss that. We need to be able to sit down and say... But
Suzanne, you've been labelled, you even saying that you're hateful, you're a TERF, you're anti-trans, and you are subject, without police protection, to violence. That's the message I got this weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to go right out there, Sean, and I'm going to say that a man cannot be a lesbian. I mean, that's just, it's outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, how did we end up here? Do you feel?
Exactly,
do you and your members, and I suppose you can only speak for you, do you feel safe or less safe in New Zealand as a result of what happened at Albert Park on Saturday?
I would say a little less safe. Personally, I don't feel particularly unsafe. I'm lucky that I don't have to worry about an employer. I think women do resist speaking out because of the repercussions with their employers. I think nobody who works for government will ever say anything. They just can't. And I live in Wellington, so an awful lot of people I know are associated with government departments and government agencies, and they just do not say a word. So, publicly.
Yeah.
I guess people have different fears.
Yeah.
And physical fears or fear for, your job, your livelihood, that kind of thing, reputation.
Yeah. And I think you had some serious issues to discuss here, and that is, for example, inside outlaw groups which are clearly pro-transgenderism, who are being paid by the government to go into schools and essentially recruit young people. You'd agree that that's happening?
I think they're certainly giving a very biased view, and they're teaching things that I think are simply not true. Things like the fact that you can change sex, or that a man can have a period and have a baby, all those sorts of things, which I think no, they're not true, and also incredibly confusing for children. And the fact that it's being taught not necessarily with parents having full. Yeah.
You do realise that, like Shanil Lal is a great friend of the government, though. He's one of the ringleaders of this.
Oh,
he provides, I think he's on some advisory group to the Prime Minister's office.
I believe it. Yeah, I mean the whole government seems to be captured. In fact, the way self-ID works here in New Zealand, we actually have some of the best, from a women's rights point of view, some of the best self-ID laws in the world, compared to countries that have passed self-ID laws, because our laws have a kind of an out clause that says, regardless of what's on your birth certificate, you can still establish somebody's sex by whatever other means, which is pretty reasonable and pretty much how people have always established people's sex anyway. So we're lucky in that respect. But the thing that's happened here over the last, 5 or 10 years, 5 years, is that it swept through government that trans women are women. And you basically have to believe that for everything else to work.
Fall into place. So, Suzanne, I am going to make, and because I've got to look at this from all angles and impartially, it would be fair to say that in the way she organised her appearance in Albert Park and the lack of coordination on the ground here, part of the chaos that ensued was down to, and I'm not saying she's responsible for the violence or the appalling behaviour of that mob, but an experienced campaigner or person involved in public protest and public speaking in New Zealand might have done quite a lot more homework and got a much more sophisticated security plan than what was on offer.
I think I can't really speak for the people who organised it, but I do know there was a lot of trouble getting security. I mean, you're probably right in that there was an underestimation of the extent, but I think also people trusted the police. I know I did.
Yeah,
I thought there were going to be a certain amount of police there, and they've been warned. They know what happened in Melbourne. They know what happened in Hobart. They know what's going on. So you would expect that they would kind of take it seriously, and they would realise that they would need a presence there, a big presence there. And it seems that they didn't. They didn't take it seriously.
Do you want to see some response from the government on what happened on Saturday?
Definitely. I mean, there's been a few responses which have been just very, very anti-woman, basically.
Hey, enough of the anti-woman. Did you hear what Marama Davison said?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's all on you, isn't it? Yeah.
I'll take that.
I know.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I know.
Look, bigger picture. It seems to me that I just think that what happened Saturday, whether it was women being shouted down and bullied or men or any group, it felt pretty sad for the country.
It was very sad for the country. I couldn't really believe I was watching it. So, and I think, we've had so much support over the weekend. We've had hundreds of emails of support, and from people we've never heard from before. And we do have the mainstream media now kind of getting in touch quite regularly, which is quite good, except that they seem to talk to us and then not really report it, because I think we're not saying anything that's actually...
Well, Suzanne, I want to give you an opportunity as we draw this interview to a close, and we've got many more people to speak to. What would you say? What would you say if he had the guts to show up this morning? What would you say to the Chanel Lyles, the Max Tweedies of this world about what happened over the weekend? What is your message to the supposed LGBTQI community who did what they did?
I would just ask them, why do you hate women so much? I think that it just shows an absolute contempt and hatred for women, and they need to look at why they feel that way, and how they feel about representing a community that does include women, and just whether they should be. Whether they need to have a good hard look at what they're actually doing, because it's doing so much harm. They're creating fear. They're telling the young people that they need to be afraid of a group of middle-aged women who think you can't change sex, and that the rest of the world, everybody hates them. That they, and it's just simply not true, and it's creating mental health issues. It's creating fear. It's doing so much harm. Those kids are vulnerable, and they're being made more so, almost. They're being kind of estranged from society because of their differences, which actually most people in society are quite happy to accept. And I think it's sad. I think they're creating that division. Yeah.
All right, Suzanne, I thank you for coming on and speaking up.
Oh, thanks. Hey, is there a chance that women can, we've got a whole lot of women from Auckland and women from Wellington who would have been standing up and speaking yesterday and the day
Between
before.
9 and 10 this morning, 9 and 10 this morning, 0800 332 It's Women's Day on the platform, Suzanne.
Nice one. Thanks, Sean.
Spread the word. Cheers. That is Suzanne Levy from Speak Up for Women. Apparently, Posie Parker is on Twitter at the moment. Yeah, okay, we'll try and get a stream of that up, shall we, Ben? In the meantime, we'll go to the news.
News on the platform.
In this update, ACT says what happened at the Posie Parker rally in Auckland is seriously concerning. Thousands protested against the views of the anti-trans activist at Albert Park's Saturday rally, seeing her quit the country early. Scuffles broke out. Parker had tomato juice poured on her, and Green MP Marama Davidson was hit by a motorcycle. ACT Deputy Leader Brooke Van Velden says it's what the party has feared.
In a civilized society like ours, you should be able to counter ideas you don't like with more speech and debate and not resort to violence and intimidation.
A new court decision may allow Pike River families to access documents that led to the coal mine company's CEO, Peter Whittle, avoiding prosecution. The High Court's decision comes nearly a decade on as the families of the 29 men killed in the disaster continue to seek justice. A judgment obtained by One News says transparency matters in the interests of justice. In 2013, all 12 charges laid against Whittle were dropped. Instead, a $3.4 million voluntary payment went to the families. Some Waikato hospital cardiac surgery patients are being caught in delays with an investigation underway after a person died on the wait list last year. Figures show the most urgent group of cases, those needing surgery within 72 hours, are being treated quickly, but the rest face major backlogs. Demand for dental work has skyrocketed, with nearly $15 million paid out since the government lifted the grant cap for people on low incomes and benefits. That's news.
Sport on the platform.
In sport, the Warriors faithful can enter workplaces around the country today with continued enthusiasm. They're fourth on the NRL League ladder with 6 points after beating the Bulldogs 16-14 at home. Blues coach Liam McDonald is pushing for a stronger performance after a stumble at the finish against the Force. The 30-17 win puts them into the top 4 on the Super Rugby Pacific ladder. McDonald admits gastro-illness disruptions during the week were reflected in his team's performance. Midfielder Matt Garbett has scored during the All Whites 2-1 football win over China in Wellington. The goal in the 81st minute sealed the win for New Zealand in a game which saw the team break a 361-day and more than 9.5-hour goal-scoring drought. The opening strike came from a Chinese own goal. That's sport. I'm Jodie Gill.
Weather on the platform, brought to you by Climate Change.
Good morning, and Dunedin a sunny day, then evening high cloud, light winds and a high of 23. Christchurch is 9 up to 22, fine apart from areas of morning low cloud or fog, light winds and afternoon northerlies. Nelson, morning cloud with the odd shower, then mainly fine, up to 20. A fine day in Wellington for the most part as well, northerlies strong in exposed places, high of 19. Tauranga was partly cloudy, a possible shower or two until late this evening. Light winds and afternoon northerly breezes. Auckland, partly cloudy, the odd shower this morning, mainly in the west, 18 degrees up to 24. And in your spotlight weather location, Murchison, it's 7 degrees and partly cloudy. There's your weather.
This idea of purity and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy.
What you have to say counts on the platform.
All right, you are on the platform, Murchison. I'm going to come back to Murchison later. Very good call, Ben. It is Ladies' Day. It's Ladies' Day on the platform today because it certainly wasn't their day on Saturday, when a baying mob of thousands, egged on by mainstream media into believing that a mother of 4 from Britain, visiting from Britain, was a Nazi, basically trampled all over free speech in this country, while the police stood by on the road outside and did absolutely frickin' nothing. They then took the woman who was in fear of her life and told her they couldn't protect her, and they were surprised she wasn't killed in the to-do and that she should leave the country immediately. Stand proud, New Zealand. Stand proud. Look, we've got an organised interview with someone who was a marshal, but firstly, Jill has rung in, and I said I'd take people's calls, particularly women's calls this morning. Jill, good morning. Welcome to the platform.
Good morning.
How can I help, Jill?
I'm totally traumatised. What happened was that I heard in advance, I wasn't going to go. I heard, though, that there was this supposed connection with Nazis. And I thought, well, I'll go and I'll speak because I have a 50-year history of standing up for women's rights and gay rights. So I thought, I'll go and speak. So I wasn't worried till I got to the venue. And I could see that there was a metal barrier around, and inside that there was about a metre with a rope. And I thought, oh, that's where they're going to put the police, like they did in Melbourne and Hobart, which separated the protesters from the women, mostly my age, who I was with. The police were nowhere to be seen. So then I saw, and this is before Posie Parker arrived, and they started to bash down the barriers. And I saw there was only one woman over beside the rotunda. So I went over there. I'm 70 years old. I went over there to try and help her to stop these people just barging in, and they were angry. It was really frightening, and I could say, that we were just totally overwhelmed. They then pushed and shoved us all the way over to right in front of the rotunda, where I was standing right next to a reporter from one of the TV news, because there was a camera person right beside him. I said to him, "Where are the police? Where are the police?" They were nowhere to be seen. Later on that night, I saw a video where I could see that when Posie Parker arrived, there was a van right beside her car, and she was saying, "Where are the police?" They were sitting in the van. I saw photos of 4 of them under a tree, way to the back of the crowd. The police were so negligent in their duty that I have now resigned from the Labour Party, where I've been involved for many years, and I'm totally traumatised by the whole thing, that there was no protection, there was no ability for us to speak, and all I wanted to do was to declare, that people from the left also have concerns about what's going on in the erasure of women from our language and from our rights.
Jill, I thank you very, very much for ringing in this morning and telling us your truth and sharing that with us. And it does matter, and you will always have a voice here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, boy. As I said, ringing, you get to have a say here. I read a piece yesterday, a first-hand account of what happened, and it was from a woman who was... who volunteered as a marshal at the event in Albert Park on Saturday night. So I was right in the thick of it. And I thought it was a very compelling and very telling piece. Rather than read it out, I got hold of and invited that woman to join us this morning. Her name's Caitlin, and she's on the line now. Caitlin, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Good morning.
Caitlin, I don't want you to read it out, but I just want you to tell your story. Tell us, for a start, why you were at Albert Park and what happened to you.
Well, I was there fundamentally, I suppose, because for the last couple of years I've been researching these issues and attending select committees and doing what I can at a individual grassroots level to try and raise some awareness of these concerns and these issues to no avail. I've heard of Kelly J. Parker before, and I agree with her views. I like the fact that she doesn't identify really as anything except herself. That's sort of how I feel about it as well. And I wanted to go and hear her speak, and I liked her concept that she then gives the platform over to women to have their say. So I wanted to go. I had a little sort of talking points and was going to speak
and
myself.
Caitlin, I just want to make it clear, you're not some sort of lesbian activist or anything. You're a mother, or you're married?
No, yeah. So I'm married. I've got 3 kids. I'm pregnant with our 4th. I'm a business owner. I don't have time to be an activist. I don't know where those people get the money or time to do that, to be honest. I'm concerned about these issues, both for myself but for all vulnerable women and for our kids and for what I am seeing happening. So, yeah, I'm not affiliated. I'm on sort of groups online. We chat, but I'm not a sort of, of course, but I'm not a fully fledged member of any political party group or anything like that. I'm too busy for all of that. So, so I wanted to go for that. I put my hand up to help out and be a marshal because I thought, this is my bit. Well, because I'm not a protester or an activist, I thought, this is how I'll show that I support. But then I sort of realised I was pregnant, and they decided that wasn't a good idea. So I wasn't a marshal on the day. My job actually on the day was meant to be much safer. It was meant to stay in touch with the person watching the live feed in the UK and simply let Kelly know if the live feed went down. So I was meant to be up on the rotunda near her, which was supposed to be a much safer role for me. So that's why I wanted to go. That was my sort of involvement. And then obviously...
hey, Caitlin, I've just got to say, if you're involved at that level, it sounds like you're a bit more involved than just a passerby, right?
It does sound like that, doesn't it? But it's really not how it works. It's sort of more a couple of days before they still hadn't had anyone put up their hand to that bit. Okay. And I sort of said, oh, look, I'll be there anyway. I can
so
do that. And I literally
was
too tired to be involved in any other meeting.
So what unfolded on the day, Caitlin?
Yeah. So on the day, we met at the Art Gallery Cafe and sort of sat down with a number of other women that I'd never met before, but sort of seen their names, and that was lovely. And then we wandered up, and there were a lot of people there, which we were expecting, I suppose, after the media, but no one seemed at that point. Everyone seemed pretty relaxed and chill, and I kind of was hopeful that, yep, they're going to do their thing, we're going to do our thing, and this is good. We're going to show the world actually how we can do this. And then as I got closer to the rotunda, I saw there were sort of two gates around, a much smaller barrier between us and them than I was expecting. But then I thought, oh, well, I suppose that's where the police stand in between. So that will be all right if the police are in between us. The noise started to become overwhelming very quickly. They all brought noisemakers, recorded sirens. I started to get concerned about, well, gosh, how are we even going to speak? Because I don't know if we're going to be able to hear anything. But it was still I was still confident the police would be there sort of momentarily to set up their barrier. But as it came closer and closer to 11, it became obvious that wasn't going to happen. The numbers just exponentially increased, the noise increased, and I just didn't even know if she was going to turn up at that point. So then she did turn up, and a person there in a purple dress who was sort of had somehow got into our side.
Yeah, that's an associate of the Greens. He's a guy who was one of the first people, a refugee, I think, from Colombia or somewhere, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So she sort of was she was actually standing right next to me, sort of going, oh, can I go in the rotunda? I'm so...
Oh, so absolutely misrepresented and lied to get in there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as soon as Kelly got there, just doused her in the tomato sauce or soup or whatever it was. So that was quite shocking, and it almost seemed to me as if that was a signal, because once that happened, all of a sudden it was like things kicked off. The barricades came down, everyone swarmed forward. For a while, no one went on to the actual rotunda. But so we stood up there sort of watching the growing mob, and at that point I was sort of thinking, well, this is a weird police strategy, but they're obviously waiting for this to happen, and now they'll come. I thought there'd be a barrier, but yep, sure, maybe they were standing back and waiting for this, and then that's going to be their reason to come. And they just didn't. Were
you people calling them? Were you asking the police to come? Because by that stage, I presume, you were surrounded.
Yeah, so I wasn't asking them to come at that point. I still foolishly thought they would. Kelly was getting more and more surrounded, and her security guards were trying to stay around her. I was sort of trying to stay to the back of the rotunda, away from the mob, obviously. And like I said, they still weren't coming into the rotunda at that stage. But as time went on, they became more and more emboldened, and it was almost as if there was a tacit understanding that, yeah, we've got this, let's just keep going. And once they all started coming onto the rotunda, and I was surrounded sort of in the rotunda, I text my husband, which seems sort of out of this world to even have to do, and asked him to call 111, because I just didn't know what else to do. There's no way they would have heard me. I didn't know if they were coming. I didn't know if they were anywhere near Albert Park.
Well, they were sitting in the van and they were under the trees, apparently, Caitlin.
Apparently. My husband said he would. I didn't hear from him for a bit, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "I'm still on hold." It turns out he was on hold for 8 minutes. At this point, people were shoving, and I think within this time, she had been escorted out. And I thought, thank God, they'll stop, they'll retreat, they'll relax now, like she's gone. They didn't. It just, in a way, from a sort of outside of myself sense, it was fascinating on one level watching a mob unfurl, watching the mentality of it and watching it grow and take on a life of its own. But of course, utterly terrifying. And it was weird. There's lots of people in there that are maybe not doing anything. But it only took one to sort of shove someone, and then they'd all kind of jump on it.
Yeah.
It was really weird. It was incredibly
Caitlin, did you see
volatile.
people being assaulted?
I did. I saw some of the marshals getting shoved by men. There was a piece of steel fence in there that had the banner attached to it, and there were women on the other side of it, including myself at one point. And then a group of men were trying to push it over, which, had they succeeded, they would have crushed the people behind it because there was nowhere for them to go. So I got out of that, and at one point I yelled and put my hand out and said, "Stop," to one of them, and he did. He kind of stopped. Like I said, this whole mob thing is just, it was incredible to kind of watch. But then someone else would do it, and then they'd jump in and do it again. I don't know. I wasn't there when that fence eventually came down. I don't know if it hurt anyone in the end, but I saw someone's flag. I saw a marshal try to grab someone's flag that he was waving about in people's faces, and it snapped. And then when he had the shard, he was jabbing at her towards her stomach, and I was right sort of near them and nearly got jabbed in the stomach myself. Because there's chairs all around, my main concern was getting crushed. My main concern was if I fall, because before we got there, they had put some sort of really slippery substance all over the cement floor of the rotunda. So parts of it were incredibly dangerous and slippery. I cleaned up a lot of it as best I could beforehand, but whatever it is, it was, it was sort of like a...
Caitlin, you said earlier, this bloke who threw the tomato sauce, you said that was like a signal. Did you get the feeling that the violence, not the drum banging and the whistle blowing, do you feel like it was organised, it was strategic?
It feels that way. It did feel that way. I feel like the level it got to might not have been planned. I feel like that's what happens when you unleash a mob and it takes on a life of its own. But I certainly feel like the swarming her was planned. That bit I feel like that was planned. It was so sudden. It wasn't like an organic thing that grew. It was very, very sudden. And it was almost like once they realised there was no police and that they basically had the blessing of everyone around them, it felt like it took on a life of its own.
And there were in the park itself, around the rotunda, there was absolutely zero police presence.
I couldn't see any. So I was in the rotunda, I was elevated. I didn't see any the entire time I was trapped in there, as far as the eye could see. And once I got escorted out and I looked back over the sea of people and at the rotunda, I didn't see anyone. I never saw a police.
How did you get out in the end, Caitlin?
There was a journalist in there, very tall fellow. I don't know if he was a journalist or just a photographer from the news. And he asked if I was okay at one point, because I guess clearly I wasn't. And I just sort of said, no, I'm 11 weeks pregnant. This is not good. And he asked if I needed a hand out. So he took my hand and he pushed through the crowd until we were out, which in itself made me feel like the weirdest difference in the world is that this huge, big, tall man was able to just sort of
part the waters,
walk through the crowd. And I just thought, gosh, that just sums this up, doesn't it? And so that's how I got out, and I thanked him, and then I went to the edge. On the edges, I didn't feel in danger. I was very shaky and quite teary. I didn't have anyone on the outer edges, sort of, because I had a little suffragette ribbon. I didn't have anyone try to attack me or jeer at me or anything like that. The ones sort of not involved in the mob, they were just sort of standing around watching. There were a couple that loitered very close and were a little bit intimidating, but definitely, I think, didn't do it. I think they need the courage of the mob. But eventually, we eventually took off any identifying things because we just didn't feel safe and got out of there, basically.
And you got home and you're okay?
Yeah, I got home okay. Had a splitting headache the next day, I think, from all the noise. The noise was like something I've never experienced as well. I mean, that wasn't just friendly music and tooting. That was people with Yui booms with a siren turned up full volume, holding it in your ear. Whistles, pots, banging it right next to your face. Like it was, the noise itself was an aggressive act. It was not this benign, let's stand back and play music.
But I'm reading, Caitlin, in the mainstream media that this was an explosion of rainbow love.
Well, it was, wasn't it? That's what it looks like.
Was it for you?
Well, not for me, no. But that is the rainbow. Sadly, is a group of fundamentalist extremists, and anyone who thinks the rainbow flag means anything other than that has not been paying attention. There are groups springing up left, right, and centre: LGB Alliance, Transsexual Voice Matters, Speak Up for Women. People are leaving the rainbow, in inverted commas, in droves because it does not represent them, and it is not full of love and unity and inclusion. It is a dogmatic, extremist, fundamentalist dogma that if you don't do exactly what they say, then they will take you down. And that's what the rainbow flag, and that's what the remainder in that core community means. And when I say that, most of that community now is heterosexual. You look around at all their spokespeople. You look around at everyone that was there that day. They're all allies, in inverted commas. All the actual, a huge number of actual transsexuals and homosexual people are getting out and making their own groups and trying to speak up about this, as well as women.
Caitlin, how do you feel about New Zealand this Monday morning, and do you feel different than you did on Friday night?
Yeah, well, obviously this is an adopted home for me. I'm from Australia, and it is hard, particularly knowing that had I attended this event in Australia, the police would have actually kept me safe. I feel deeply ashamed. It's not what I have known New Zealand to be, but it is what New Zealand is becoming. And unless Kiwis stand up and take back their reputation from these people, then it's only going to get worse.
Caitlin, I thank you very, very much indeed for telling us and speaking your story to me and everyone listening on the platform today.
Thank you, and thank
for
you
your and your bravery. To be honest,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really mean it. That is Caitlin. That was her story of free speech in New Zealand, in Albert Park. Look, we're going to drop the 8 o'clock news, and the bastards who provide it to us are still saying she's an anti-trans activist, so it doesn't really hurt me that much. So there'll be no 8 o'clock news because calls and texts are lining up, and we've still got Jonathan Aileen to come and Brooke Van Velden from ACT, and I want your calls.